Welcome back to TPI Talk. But before we get into today's episode, there's something I'd like to say. Firstly, a word from our sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends. Raid is a free-to-play mobile RPG.
What the hell do you call this?
A video thumbnail?
Wrong. A bad video thumbnail. You missed out on so many elements of romance. So many talking points you could have addressed.
Are you mad at me?
No, just disappointed.
Oh god, that's worse. So, what now?
For your crimes against romance.
Since when was this a trial? And what court?
The court of romance. And this is the jury.
I feel like this is kind of stacked against me.
As such, we sentence you to death. No, not at all, Frederick. You must make another video, this time under my supervision, to make sure you don't screw things up.
Fine. Hello everybody, Aiden Care, aka the Crazy Chandelure here, and welcome back to another episode of TPI Talk. Today I've got a very special guest, and coincidentally enough, he also has a series called TPI Talk. Who would have thought of it? Please introduce yourself.
Hi, it is I, Telly ZX. You may also know me by my channel, Emerald Star Productions. And yes, coincidentally, I also have a show called TPI Talk. It's a podcast.
Yeah.
And in case you're wondering, yes, we are settling in court.
And we've got the date lined up. Got my lawyers all booked, all three of them.
I have no lawyers.
Okay, I just had to splash the cash for such an important event.
I mean, I guess I'll consider my lawyer as, I don't know, I guess we'll get my pet snom. His name's Chili.
Okay, I give up then, you're gonna win. Anyways, so today we're gonna be talking about a topic that I've covered before and Telly has covered before.
As of the recording of this lovely video, literally less than a week ago.
Yeah, so I mean, there might be a few similar things to what Telly said, but my opinions on how to write romance and tips for writing it have certainly changed since the last time I did the video, which is, oh my god, I think it's been like a year since I did that episode. Jesus Christ.
You're entering the world of procrastinating on a series and coming back almost a year later to do something. You're becoming, a real and true content creator by the minute.
No, I feel so honored. All I need to do is make an apology video with me crying in the thumbnail and say I did not want to have to make this video, and then I'm golden.
And then you also have to make sure that you continue being a drama whore on Twitter, and then be like, I didn't do this, I should have not done this, and be impulsive as hell.
Also, one more thing, please donate to my Patreon. You get such perks as watching videos early whenever I decide to make them, join a Discord server that I will never be active in, and, you just give me money. So, please donate to that.
Hey, we just explained 2020 in a nutshell.
Exactly, see? You can just hibernate for the rest of this awful year, and you won't miss anything.
But yeah, now I know a lot of you are probably wondering, why on earth are you discussing romance in the year of 2020 where romance is impossible? Like, no, that's not true. Romance is a thing that still exists in 2020, even if it's not as frequent. But no, we're going to be discussing romance in relation to TPIs. And yeah, some of my points will be slightly familiar if you've seen a certain podcast episode. But we're going to try to be a little different than that and go in an interesting direction as best as we can.
Yes, we will try our best.
And if we fail, well, we can laugh about it later.
Exactly.
I laugh about it all the time.
So do I. I also laugh about the 2 previous failed recordings before this.
Right. So in case y'all are wondering, we had recorded this initially earlier in the year. However,
yes.
Unfortunately, his recordings are not very salvageable, so we're doing it again.
Yes, and this will also be the last video that I make before my new mic arrives, which will be hopefully much higher quality, so expect some high quality, crisp audio in the future.
Ooh, HD.
No, it's gonna be amazing audio.
We have to stand.
We do. So, getting back on topic, finally, romance in TPIs and other genres, and just general tips on how to write them. I know I went last time into like different types of romance, where you like introduce the characters for the relationship, and then they come into it when they start off in a relationship, which is a lot more uncommon. Like different ways relationships build, like getting to know each other first, or there's just relationships where it's like general just attraction and then it builds from there. All these are completely valid, and there's no one best relationship to do. Honestly, any of these work. It's all in how you write it, which is basically the same for anything, really.
I blanked out. What did you say that last part again?
Okay, I'll repeat it exactly the same.
Not all of it. Just try to abbreviate it.
Okay. So yeah, last time I went into like the different types of romance and
Okay.
everything.
I got that part. Awesome.
Okay, you're all caught up.
Okay, yeah, I remember what you brought up. So yeah, he brought up two specific different parts of romance, and I'm just like, okay, well, I feel like there could be more to that, and you could branch out.
And that's what we're here to do.
Ease. So you can start.
All right. So, in my opinion, there's no like one objectively best type of romance to do. Like you can introduce a relationship in really any way, and if you write it well, then it can turn out great. Like you can always, and I know it's a bit difficult to try and structure a well-balanced relationship because if you're writing a show, you have other characters. You can't just always focus on the two that are getting into a relationship, especially if you're doing a TPI, because it's not like you're focusing solely on those two characters. It's hard to balance it out, which is why a lot of people tend to do shorter romances that don't really last as long, but slow burns and TPIs can work as well, if that's what you're trying to do.
Well, I guess that also depends on the show, because slow burn romance is one that goes on for quite some time, and there's a high chance they're probably not going to end up together till maybe the end of the season. Sort of like a slow burn story in general.
Yeah, it does. For example, if your cast is like 16 people, maybe a slow burn wouldn't be the best idea. Not to say you can't do it. I'm sure there are plenty of capable people that could do a slow burn romance with only a small cast. But at the same time, you need to consider how long those two are going to be in the game, and basically characters themselves. You need to always consider that, especially when writing a slow burn, because you need to make the character interactions enjoyable if you're building to a slow burn.
In my opinion, I also have to say this: if you're gonna do, the slow burn, just keep in mind that have a starting point and an end point, and if they're supposed to go all the way to the end, don't make it obvious, because you could very easily be like, oh, these two are going to the end because they're going to go through the ups and downs of falling in love. And if you are doing that, perhaps be careful, because that could easily reveal who might be going to the end. It's sort of how World Tour it was a dead giveaway that Heather and Alejandro were basically going to the end. They were each other's equal, and they were clearly up and down on what they wanted to be. So, don't do that.
Also, try not to make it like Mike and Zoe in All Stars. It was
two heathens.
Yeah, I mean they were technically together, the start of the season, but they built up so much relationship plot with them, and like there's so much focus on those two as characters. You were kind of expecting it to be those two to the end. So yeah, just try and make it. You don't have to be too subtle, but just try not to make it blatantly obvious that these two have like this massive plot and they're gonna get so far just because of that.
Yeah, but also, slow burn is just one type of relationship you could do in a TPI, but I also recommend not putting it in your TPI as much, because slow burn implies that it's going to be there for a while, and it's going to take a hot minute to get them together, if they even get together on the show and you don't cheat us out and do a post-season thing. So slow burn works infinitely better in a non-reality show area. I should know, I'm working on a semi-slow burn show right now.
You promoting your content on my channel, oh, that's a big no-no.
Right, says the person who's backed by Raid Shadow Legends.
Damn it.
You're not fooling anyone. But yeah, slow burn
Old again.
Yeah, slow burn is an interesting type of relationship that I really have come to enjoy, thanks to webcomics, but we're not going to get into that. That I really like, but I don't know how much I feel about it in TPIs, because if TPIs have taught me anything, especially some of the newer ones, is that having a romance go on for a long freaking time can drag on. Not going to name any names, but I'm sure you know a specific love triangle I'm referring to.
Let's not.
I'm just saying, I'm not going to refer. I'm just saying, if you want something to go on for a long period of time, pace it well, and don't make it obvious as if they're going to go to the end or not. Otherwise, it's going to drag and it's going to get boring. I'm just saying.
Then it could ruin what could be a potentially really great relationship.
Yeah, pretty much. It's why I'm... And then you're probably going to go, oh, what about instant romance? Okay, well, that's the other opposite. You shouldn't do that either. I don't recommend that.
There's a difference between instant romance and instant attraction, though. That's an important distinction, because instant romance is like, you know, two characters see each other, and it's like, yes, I love you. We will be in a relationship, and we will be the strongest relationship, and we will always be together forever and forever. We're going to get married, and we're going to have a bunch of babies, or whatever. Instant attraction is just finding someone else attractive in some way. There's not a bad thing, because that happens in real life as well, especially with teenagers, who most TPI characters are. Like most, not all, there are plenty of people that do over 20s and do like really old characters, like Game Changers, like Drapion's like 1,000,000 years old or something. He probably is, but there isn't anything wrong with a character finding another character attractive off the bat, just based on like how they look in their eyes. There's nothing wrong with that.
I capitalize on that.
Exactly. So there's nothing wrong with doing that in your series, and if you want to do that, go ahead, and you shouldn't feel that would be instant romance, because it's not. It's just someone finding someone attractive, and that can build to a relationship, and that can be a good foundation relationship. But that's not instant romance, and you shouldn't feel like you shouldn't include that if you want to, just because you're scared it will be labeled as instant romance.
Yeah. The biggest takeaway is you can have someone immediately have an attraction to someone, because everyone's got that moment where they're physically attracted to someone. Okay, that's normal. But from there, you can either make it seem like that's all they're into, or have it build up to something more. But if you have them just immediately get together just based on looks alone, that's a problem, because, well, that just makes them look like shallow bitches, and we don't want that.
Exactly. That can be, like I said, a good start, like the two characters talking, or one character starting to flirt with the other one, or introduce themselves to the other one. And you don't always have to build a relationship from there. You could just do it as like a one-off joke or something if you wanted to.
Yeah, that too. Because you can have two people just be flirty, but also realize that they're just gonna end up staying friends. I love the genre as a whole, but I like it when it's clear that they're gonna stay friends, or I like it when it's just a friendship. It doesn't always have to result in romance, you know? Because you can still have two really awesome besties who clearly have some of the best chemistry, but for all we know, they could just kind of be bros or BFFs or whatever. Whatever they want to label it as, whatever friendship they want to label it as. Doesn't matter. I just feel you don't necessarily need to have it end up as a romance. It could just be two characters who happen to have some really damn good chemistry.
You can work with that as well. You can build really good character relationships off of that don't have to be a relationship.
Yeah, that's something, basically. Just it doesn't always have to result in a relationship on the side of romance, because it doesn't always have to end up that way. Because if that's the only direction you go in, and that's all, then that's all you're ever gonna go in, because that you think that because that's the most effective. And I think people have to understand there's more than just romantic relationships. Platonic relationships exist. Romances exist for a reason, folks.
And you don't always need to have super, like we were saying before, super long relationships. If your character just has like an attraction to someone and it's a quick relationship, that's fine, but don't drag it out too long. Like if your characters like get together briefly because they find each other attractive, that's fine, but don't have it drag on for too long, and try and have it serve some sort of purpose.
And then I guess another thing I want people to consider before they dive into any form of romance, please, for the love of God, just avoid love triangles. I'm not saying
love triangles.
Overall, I'm not saying don't write them, or if you're considering it, just stop. No, I'm just saying unless you have a way to not make it go on for too damn long and make it seem like one side's the actual worst and all that, and you yourself aren't even a fan of love triangles, I just say steer clear of it. If there's one thing I've learned the hard way, it's that I suck at writing love triangles myself, and that I swore them off. I swore them off like 2 years ago.
And if you do plan to introduce a love triangle, which, like Telly is saying, is fine, the thing I would recommend is plan it out. Don't just introduce it as a plot point and then develop it from there. If you want to make a love triangle good and something that your audience is actually interested in, or at least something that they don't, find annoying or boring, it would be good to plan it out before you introduce it, or introduce it as you go. A love triangle is something you kind of need to commit to, I'd like to say. Commit to how long it's going to be, what the characters are like, how it's going to end.
But also, all the characters within this plot, that triangle shouldn't define them. That shouldn't be the only thing that they're defined by, and that shouldn't be the only thing they're doing. If it's the only thing they're doing and they're defined by it, then you can't be surprised that when they're sent away, no one gives a damn about it. Okay?
If all Fred's doing is pining after Amy, then no one's going to be too upset if he goes home. If Fred's also dealing with being backstabbed in the game, or Fred's getting over some kind of issues that he's had, then people are going to care more when he goes away.
Yeah. So just give them more to do, Give them something give them something outside of that. Like, obviously, you can have a character be involved with slowly falling for someone and fighting for their love, but at the same time, they could, I don't know, get involved in an alliance that is unrelated and is dealing with trust issues. Or hell, have another character deal with their tragic backstory of, my parents are dead or something like that. I don't know. Whatever you can come up with, just have it be that they're dealing with something outside of the triangle, so that they're more than that.
Because that's the thing that I feel like is why a lot of people aren't too interested in romantic relationships, because whenever a character gets involved with another character, it's usually that takes up so much focus and so much screen time in other genres besides just romance that people get annoyed by it. So you need to give a character, something else to do.
More or less. And for the longest time now, I've just been looking into why do people like romance? Because tea time, I know there are people who enjoy the new romantics, but you can tell based on the views what they prefer more. Obviously, they prefer Pokemon fighting for money over two buff guys making out. That is beside the point. I looked into why people might not be into romance, and as I said in my podcast episode, I brought up how it may be the case of maybe they're just not a fan of the genre, or they've seen so many different types of romance on other shows, not TPI or otherwise, where it's not that good. Because media doesn't do the best job with romance either, depending on the show. Which is unfortunate.
Exactly. It feels like a lot of the time when non-romance genred shows bring up relationship dynamics, it just doesn't end up. It takes up so much time. It just drags on for so long that people just lose interest, and that lets people, just have a negative impression of romance as a genre, or romance as something to use in your show, because it can work really well.
Thing is, though, there's just these different areas where they see romance regularly, and it probably turns them off. For example, soap operas. Fellas, ladies, and non-binary folks, do yourself a favor. Stay away from soap operas. Because soap operas drag things out. Because they're done on a weekly basis, or a daily basis, actually. 5 days a week, actually. These soap operas are weird. But basically, these daily soap operas are a hot mess. They have this ongoing thing that goes on for the entire year. And it's often seen as cheesy or super sexy based on whatever moment's going on. And then they surprise you like, oh, these characters are done. And then they get back together, 4 months later. They break it off again, get back together. It's sad. And then, of course, you have novels. The genre of romance in novels has not been the greatest. Depending on
Twilight, PTSD flashbacks.
We don't discuss the Twilight.
I know, I'm just having the PTSD flashbacks right now.
You want flashbacks? I subjected myself to 50 Shades of Grey.
Oh God.
Yeah. You want flashbacks?
I'm sorry.
I subjected myself to 50 Shades of Grey. I don't know why I did, but I did. But hey, it made for great commentary when I brought it up in episode 5.
Yeah, so I guess it was worth it in some way, if that makes you feel any better.
I mean, if it meant Venusaur had to suffer reading all 3 books, then really, who wins?
Exactly.
I mean, really, he deserved it. That being said, I just think, as a genre, I think folks just find it to be very cheesy. Not helping are the obvious cheesy rom-com flicks, which are typically called chick flicks, which... Okay, I'll give you that. They when they fall under that, sometimes they do seem that way. So it's just a matter of, it depends on what they're viewing and how they see it in media. So sometimes that affects how they feel about love in general. And unless you're dealing with romance in your own personal life, at the end of the day, you're really not going to care for it. Especially if you're if you're forever single. No offense to all the single people probably watching this.
Feeling called out right now. But yeah, it all just depends like what your interests are and what your life is like. That can really affect how you view romance or if you want to see it in, as well as just trying to find a good balance between romance being in a show and romance not being in a show. A good example of a show doing romance well in a season that is not romance focused, I'd have to say is season 1 of The Flash. Now, on the CW, I'm not a fan of what The Flash is now. I think the seasons have really declined in quality, but that's just my hot take.
Going.
So I feel like in season 1 they handled it well because Barry was pining after Iris, and there were times that was brought up in episodes, and he had to deal with his feelings, and there was like other romances going on with like Iris and her boyfriend, but that wasn't like the focus. The focus was still the superhero action, was still the plot of like what happened with the particle accelerator, all the different villains, all the different plot lines with like Captain Cold and that sort of stuff, the Reverse Flash who killed Barry's mom. Like they were still able to balance all that with having this about the romance, with like developing Barry's feelings for Iris, showing the relationship of Barris and not Barris, Iris and God, what was his name? It's been so long since I've seen season 1 of The Flash. Thrawn guy, but not the evil one, the police officer one.
I've never watched Flash, so
okay, so this isn't really helping me make my case, but I do have a point here. The point is that show, at least for the first season, managed to have a good balance between them. So that's something that I'd recommend. If you are writing romance in a TPI, you can have time on it, but just you have to make sure you develop other plots as well, and the other stuff happens.
Yep, that about sums it up on that front. Because I think, and I didn't even realize The Flash had a decent romance plot. I could care less about The Flash or any of CW's DC shows, but that's neat.
Yeah. I've kind of lost interest in all of them, but like I just really like the first season of the CW Flash. Like that first season is actually good, and I hold that one season in good memory.
The one singular season. How many seasons are there now?
I think there's like 5. Like I watched season 2, and I thought that was pretty good, and then after that I kind of lost interest. I did like the DC Legends of Tomorrow, a series that they did as well.
That show's still going too.
Yeah, still going too, even though it should have ended after the second season. But that's besides the point.
I know Arrow ended already.
It dragged on for too long. Arrow stopped being good after the second season. But this isn't me complaining about the CW. That could be another episode, maybe, if I decide to turn this into a podcast. I just talk about random stuff. Still call it TPI Talk because I'm too lazy to come up with another podcast name.
Now, who would come up with a podcast name similar to another person's show? I'd never do that.
Who would have thunk it that would happen?
No.
Couldn't be me. Couldn't be me.
Oh, never. So yeah.
Getting back on topic once again. That's just like general advice how to do your romance, or just like a few tips. And I know Telly said this on several occasions, and I believe even I said it back in my old romance video, but you don't have to do it. Don't feel pressured to do it because other people have done it. Don't feel like it's something you need to include because it tends to happen a lot on reality shows, which it often does. You don't need to do it. And that doesn't make your show any better or worse by not including it.
As I said in the episode, Game Changers took initiative and decided not to put it in the show. And it's better off because of it, because I don't think romance would fit in with any of the contestants on Game Changers. Okay? I love Game Changers. Like, I know it's only a pilot, but I love the show for what it is. And for the fact that we're not gonna. I'm not coming to that show for love. I'm coming to that show for funny, and that's exactly what it's delivering.
Just make sure if you're not gonna do it, you kind of like let people know. I'm not saying you need to do like a separate video in your series, like you make episode 1 and then you just make a random update video being like, yeah, no romance in my show, love is dead, see you all in the next episode. You don't need to do something like that.
Just make a whole video where it's like, hi, there will be no romance in this show. I don't like love. Love is dead.
Someone's gonna do it now that I've said
I'm
it.
depressed. Don't love. Love sucks.
I'm stuck single for the rest of my life. I can't find happiness with another person. No romance in my show. Subscribe. That I wouldn't be surprised if that becomes a video one day. But you don't have to do that. You could just make like a comment on it. Like for example, with Game Changers, bringing it up once again, someone in the comments of the first episode mentioned, oh, I kind of hope that the thing with I believe it was Snover and Roserade, I could be wrong, or it was Roserade and Riolu, one of the two. Like, someone mentioned, oh, I think that could develop into a relationship thing. And then Denver just made a comment saying, I'm happy that you're liking the characters, but, there's going to be no romance. You could just do that. You don't need to make it a big deal. Just, like, bring it up when it becomes appropriate if someone asks, or just put it in a comment. You don't have to make a big deal over it, because romance doesn't need to be a big deal, whether you have it or whether you're not, whether you don't, because it is a part of real life. It's something that happens regularly, so you don't need to make this big dramatic deal out of it all the time.
Yeah, and also if commenting about it doesn't work out, and you think you're going to get more comments about it, another thing you could do is just, well, you can make it clear in the show that it's not going to be in there. Like, one thing you can do from the jump is just make it clear in the show that there's no something of that going on. Like, if your show's going to be a super serious show, obviously you're not going to suddenly have a comedy in it. You're not going to suddenly have a joke in it. Obviously. But, and
yeah,
you got to make it clear from the jump what kind of show you're doing so that people go into it. Because if you have any type of romantic tendencies or attractions at the start, then people are going to assume something might happen. So if you don't want that,
yeah, and when it doesn't happen, that's kind of when bad stuff happens. Like, to bring up Ruby as an example for those that have seen it.
Oh god, I forgot that show has some mixed bag romance in it, and we're gonna leave it at that.
It does. I mean, I could do an entire episode, or like an entire 2-hour podcast, my thoughts of Ruby and all the stuff about it, but I won't. I'll save you time and me time. The thing with Ruby's romance, what they did is they had 2 characters that had flirty scenes, and like we said, you can do flirty scenes between friends, and it doesn't need to develop into romance. The problem with what happened was how they handled it outside of the show. They never made a comment about, this relationship is not going to happen, and they had a bunch of the staff members, retweeting all the fan art they did of the ship and everything, and then something happened. Be exact, penetration happened, but not the kind of penetration people were hoping for.
For those of you who are unaware, or don't watch Ruby, long story short, earlier this year, I am not surprised that also happened in 2020, but earlier this year, we almost had a very cute couple with 2 dudes in Ruby. I'm not going to bring up who, for the sake of anyone who may not be caught up with Ruby somehow, even now in July 2020. But basically, 2 guys, and there was a lot of teasing both on and off of the show, especially on Twitter. So, it looked like these 2 could potentially become something. And then things happened. In the penultimate episode? Yeah, it was the penultimate episode.
Yeah, it was the finale.
Yeah, it was the penultimate episode right before the finale, and one of them died. At the hands of the other person. And it was brutal. And it left people in shambles for like a week. What else? People being mean.
And that led to a lot of backlash and criticism, which wasn't really Rooster Teeth's fault in a sense. Like, they kind of messed up, but they weren't doing it in like a malicious sort of way. Like, it wasn't like they were teasing people that this was going to happen, and then they just like gave the middle finger to their audience.
Yeah, but
at the same time, it's not really the audience's fault for getting that sort of expectation when looking at the characters react, which is why you as the author need to take some sort of responsibility, especially when it comes to romance, and more specifically LGBT romance, I feel like, because of how, it's becoming more of a, I'm trying to find the right word here, more of a thing that's used more often in shows now. Like, there's a lot more shows that are bringing in LGBT rep.
Oh yeah,
rep
we're getting a lot
relationship.
We're getting a lot more of that now.
Exactly, but because of how that because of the fact that it was implied to be an LGBT relationship, and there wasn't any statements by anyone about how it was going to happen, people got expectations, and then when those expectations weren't delivered and were shattered in such a way, it wasn't like one of them turned around and kissed a woman, for example. It was one of them essentially killed the other one. So that just caused the outbreak to be much worse than it would have been if someone at RT, one of the writers or the head of the Ruby social media, made a statement to say, this, we're happy that you like this ship, that's great, and we love all the fan art, but this ship isn't going to happen. And I know you might be concerned that might spoil potential character interactions or stuff like that, or plot points, but you do kind of need to own up to that and do it.
Yeah, the biggest gripe I have with that is maybe you shouldn't have constantly teased it as we saw it in real time. Don't tease it outside of the show. Keep quiet if you already know what's going to happen, because it was clear they all knew what was going to happen. They were on they worked on the show. And I think that's another thing they have to keep in mind. If something is going to happen, fine, cool, awesome. But at the same time, if it's not going to happen and you know damn well it's not going to happen, and you don't want to get anyone's hopes up, well, don't be a tease. Don't be a tease, especially if you know it's not going to happen. First of all, that makes you look sadistic, and second, that makes you also look like a liar when things don't go that way, and then you're just looking at people who had their hopes up. Especially when you constantly talk about how, ooh, look at this gay character on this show and this character on there. Look, we have representation on the show. That's
it's just something that kind of bothers me. Not the fact that there is no rep for that type of stuff. Even though I don't really fall into the LGBT group, I do think that representation is a very important thing. But, if you have it, you kind of need to, show it. One issue that I had, and we're going back to Ruby here, and I'm sorry about this, but there's one particular character who is a trans character, which is great, because, even though, we're more accepting to, gay characters and lesbian characters and bisexual characters, in media, trans characters aren't represented as much. Not to, I mean that in, a way that, I know that there are still struggles with representation for the other parts of the LGBT group, but, I feel like trans is the least represented group in that bunch. So, the fact that they had the character is a great thing, but they never brought it up in show. If you're gonna have it, you should kind of show it rather than just make a statement on your Twitter page and then pat yourself on the back for how diverse you are
We
or how
did it.
great of a
We
writer
did
you are
it.
because you're
We
doing it.
saved representation by posting it on Twitter.
Exactly. That tends to that tends to how it ends up being in a lot of shows. You don't show it in any way, but you're still willing to pat yourself on the back and claim that you're supportive of particular groups because you've got it in your show. But I'm not going to state it or reference it at any point. It's like with the Harry Potter books, where J.K. Rowling would go on Twitter or Facebook or whatever and would be like, "Oh yeah, Dumbledore, he's a gay character." If you look at his dialogue closely, I always intended for him to be gay, but I just never showed it. And then, nothing ever happened with that.
Oh, that gets on my nerves every freaking time. God.
But it's like with romance in the sense that if you're gonna have it, show it. Have the balls to include it. Don't just say, oh yeah, this happened, just off screen.
Right.
Or
And
sorry, I went on a tirade there. It's just something that annoys me.
Oh, I get you. Because if it's gonna happen off screen, and I know there are special cases of this, but if it's gonna happen off screen, and you have a cast that's goes from one season to another, like an original cast, then one of the best things you could do is give us a little dab of context between the two seasons, so we get an idea of what the hell happened and how they ended up together. That's actually one of the good things, well, half and half, that Total Drama did. For some of their couples, we're not going to get into all of their couples, but the point is, they showed what was going on. For example, say what you will about Duncan and Courtney. Don't worry, I have much to say about them. But the point is, their relationship was shown, especially in between seasons. Now, sadly, that relationship is garbage, but it was shown. It was shown how garbage it was. So credit where it's due. That's kind of
another good thing.
Yeah. What?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
No, what were you gonna say?
Well, I was gonna say another good thing is as a TPI show or like a TPI creator, you don't need to worry about the same restrictions that televised shows do, because you don't have to have censors.
Mm-hmm.
You can add as much to it.
Well,
as you want.
To a point, because I say this to.
To a point.
I say this.
There are some stuff that should be filtered and that shouldn't be shown.
I say this in general to most TPI makers. If find a limit, find a line, don't cross that line, and make sure you're at least keeping things appropriate. As far as standards are concerned.
You don't need to make your show like a lot of other shows completely, child friendly, so the Karens won't be mad about it. But at the same time, there is a certain line that you shouldn't cross. Could you? Like I was saying, the good thing about working on a show and on the internet is that you don't have the same lines as most television shows have. Like, you can include more stuff. You can have alternate bits of content. Like, if you want to have a couple that got together in season 1 and show them together and got together off screen in season 1, and then you want to show it in season 2, you can have a mini-sode about them getting together, or you can make a small bit of extra content.
Yeah, it's really that simple. We have it easy because we can make varied lengths of episodes, provided they're not too long. But the point is, you can make varied lengths, and if you need to tell that story in that episode, you're not restrained to 22 minutes plus commercials. You can have that plot go on for the episode as long as you need be. That is a plus. And yeah, Aiden had a point. Karens don't really look at these shows. Thank God. They would hate us.
No, we'd all be canceled immediately.
I could just imagine a Karen looking at Scrafty the Electivire in that one scene in episode 8, and they're like, why is my child watching these two creatures getting it on?
That is not appropriate for little Timmy to be viewing.
Why is my child viewing this show? And I'd be like, Well, Miss Karen, if you think that's bad, you should see that your child views the New Romantics. What? Nothing.
If you think that's bad, you see your child's internet history.
Oh, Jesus Christ. No. I mean, let's be honest. They say they act like the kids all scot free, and I'm like, no, honey, you underestimate the curiosity of the youth, and that will forever be your biggest your biggest mistake. So long as you live.
You need to think about all the stuff that like kids say to each other at school. You know, I learned more swear words on the playground than I ever did off of TV.
Most of the stuff I learned was at school, but at the same time, I think while I was in middle school, it was, let's just say YouTube. Well, YouTube had been, and YouTube was still new in 2005 through 2007, and that was when I was heading right into middle school. So you could say we learned a lot of stuff thanks to early YouTube, and leave it at that.
Yeah, early YouTube. That's a trip. I mean, I wasn't there for early YouTube, but I know what kind of stuff they did.
Oh wait, and I was there for early YouTube. Oh, it was a trip.
Trip and a half.
I miss early YouTube. At least then,
Good old days.
well, some parts of early YouTube. There are other parts I'm glad died. And some that are still alive.
Better or for worse.
I suppose. And to finish off this whole thing, just to get back on topic, the biggest conclusion I can say to all of this is, to anyone who plans on having romance in their show whatsoever, I want to make it clear that just make sure you're into the genre. To some degree, you gotta enjoy the genre. You know? You gotta enjoy it to some degree. You don't have to completely love it like me. You could just kind of like it. And if you're concerned about something that you're very iffy about, look into it, research. A good example is, for shameless plug again, but for the New Romantic Series 3, I am tackling we'll call it a very mature subject in the realm of romance. That is far more serious in scope than I've ever touched on in any show I've touched on or written. And to make sure that this plot was decent, I had to look into seeing how it worked and, not stepping on anyone's toes on what exactly to do in certain areas I shouldn't go to. So it's a tough subject to go into. I'm not going to bring it up here because you got to see the show for yourself whenever it decides to come out because I'm lazy. But the point is, it's something I've been writing and perfecting for the last 2 years. The point is, if you're going to put it in your show, just make sure you know what you're doing with it. You don't have to know everything initially, but you should at least know how it's going to start and have an idea on where you want to go with it. And don't be afraid to change it as you go, because plans always change. They always change. It's just in general, especially.
You always need to be flexible with change as well. You always need to be willing to change and adapt to whatever the situation calls for. And if you want some good recommendations from me as to how you can learn more about romance if you want to include it in your show, before I did episode, I think it was 3, was my romance episode. Before I released that, I did spend a decent amount of time looking at various webtoons, which delved into, romance and that sort of stuff. I watched a few different movies, like, I don't get into, like, which ones, because I don't want to give, like, a massive list. But I watched a few. I asked some people who were into the genre, what are, like, keys when writing it, that sort of stuff. So don't be afraid to ask. don't be afraid to look into things, especially if you want to include it. You know, you should put in the extra effort if that's what you want to include in your show.
But yeah, if you want, I recommend looking at webtoons. This is not a shameless plug. This is just me telling you. I recommend webtoons, especially the romance ones, because they do a damn good job especially the ones I read. I'm not going to recommend any because I have a whole video for that. But point is, if you want to start somewhere, look into webtoons because they have a long form format where they're able to tell the stories with these characters over a lengthy period of time, especially if it's a slow burn. Because if it's a slow burn, honey, you're in for a long haul.
Oh god, there's so many good slow burns on webtoons.
Yeah.
And the best part about webtoons is it's free. You don't need to pay unless you want to see, chapters early and that stuff. And most series update a weekly basis as well. So it's easy. There's even an app for it. So it's really easy to access, and it is definitely worth the time. Because even if you're thinking of doing romance, you look into some romance webtoons, and you don't like them, well, there's plenty of other webtoons on the site. I mean, I was looking for romance ones initially, but I found probably one of my favorite webtoons and one of my favorite stories of all time through just being on the site and looking up different genres. I won't say which one it is, because I'm actually thinking of making an entire video on that particular webtoon, but you get what I mean.
That sounded like a webtoon ad, and you're not getting paid for it.
I know, I'm willing to do it. I'm also kind of secretly hoping that someone from Webtoon will see this and I'll get sponsored, but,
Dude, did you hear that? Hire us. We will literally give you credit every freaking video. Please, we're begging.
No, give us the ad revenue. Here's the sponsored content.
I will literally make multiple videos about every romance comic I'm reading.
I'd just be fine if I got paid in, the Webtoon coins, so I could just catch up on things without having to spend my own money on the coins to catch up on series. I'd be willing to take that.
It's like, I'll pay you in coins. Perfect. Fast pass, here I come.
I know, fast pass content on the go.
I actually use fast pass.
I sometimes use it. It just depends on the webtoon.
It also depends on if I have the money.
That too,
It has to
sometimes be tough.
It do be tough. That's 2020 for you. And yeah, I think that's all I have to say on the subject. Mostly because I made a whole episode on this already. So, well, consider this supplementary content.
Exactly. Consider this like TPI Talk. What episode were you on?
I believe it was 6.
Okay, so consider this like Telly's TPI Talk episode 6.5 then, I guess. Or, I don't know.
6.5. I don't know when this video is going to come out, so by the time 6.5 comes out, there's a high chance I'll be done with TPI Talk's first season. So,
for all we know. It just depends on how much I procrastinate. But I would like to thank you, Telly, for being on the show for... I think I'm on, episode 8 now. So, this should be coming out relatively soon after recording, and, since I'm using a blue snowball mic, that's right, I'm going high quality for this one.
high crisp.
High crisp, yes. The audio should sound good, and hopefully this will be out relatively soon after recording, and expect more TPI Talk content, because I want to get back into it, because it's a fun thing to do. I enjoy this.
You should also expect this TPI soon.
Hopefully. This year, definitely.
This year, Jesus. Oh, no. Oh, no.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no. Oh, God.
Just watch it be, December 30th and 31st for the prologue and episode 1.
I mean, at least something comes out.
Yeah, I've been holding... Oh, God. My TPI experience is certainly a memorable one. But anyway, please leave any suggestions for future TPI Talk topics in the description below. I'd love to read them. And also, once again, a huge thanks to Telly, aka Emerald Star Productions, for joining me on this episode. He has his own channel, obviously, and he does his own TPI Talk series and a bunch of other content like his own TPI series AXE, which has a season 2 coming out September, I think?
Just say Labor Day.
It's coming out sometime, anyway, and a bunch of other content, which I'm sure you guys will like. But yeah, that's all for this episode of TPI Talk. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Goodbye.
Farewell.